She said, "We're different worlds, he fits mine," before packing up and walking out. For a full 3 seconds, I honestly thought she was quoting something. A movie, a book, one of those melodramatic TikToks she saves for later. I just blinked at her, fingers still hooked under the side of the cardboard box she'd dragged out of the wardrobe, my knees pressed into the worn carpet. My brain grabbed the sentence, turned it over, and refused to attach it to my actual life. I focused on the stupidest detail, the way her hands shook as she folded another t-shirt, the tiny freckle on her left wrist. The zipper on her overnight bag was half open, a red scarf spilling out. Behind her, the window was fogged from our breath, and the cheap heater city lights smeared into messy streaks. "Say that again," I heard myself say, although I'd heard her perfectly. My voice sounded off, thin and papery. I shifted back, my thighs complaining from kneeling too long. The box in front of me still had our rent receipts at the bottom. We'd been using it as a misc box for paperwork and random cables. Now it was apparently a breakup box. Mara's eyes flicked up to mine, then away, tracing the ceiling cornice like the answer was written there. "Nick," she said, voice soft but weirdly steady, "please don't make me repeat it." She placed another folded jumper in the suitcase, smoothed it down like it mattered if it creased. I noticed she was putting the nicer clothes in the bag and the old ones in the box, taking herself, leaving the leftovers. My chest felt tight, like someone had quietly closed a fist around my lungs. It was a Thursday night in late August. We'd been together just over 3 years, living together for almost 2. I'm 31M, she's 29F. I'm writing this on a throwaway because some of our friends live on Reddit and I really don't want the "hey man, is this you" messages. I know this sub is full of breakup stories, cheating stories, we grew apart stories. I've read enough of them at 3 a.m. in the last few weeks to know I'm not special. But it's one thing to read, "We were from different worlds," in some stranger's post, and another to hear it from the person folding your t-shirts into a box. When I say different worlds, I don't just mean different hobbies or Spotify Wrapped. I mean the whole package, where we grew up, what our parents did or didn't do, how we think about time and money, and what a good life even is. I'm from what people politely call the Outer West and less politely call out there. Dad's a mechanic, Mum works at Woolies. I did the whole TAFE then apprenticeship route, became an electrician, started my own little business doing domestic jobs and small commercial contracts. My life is early alarms, steel-capped boots, traffic on the M4, invoices, and the satisfaction of getting some old switchboard to stop tripping. Mara grew up on the other side of the city, the side with leafy streets and sandstone houses. Her dad's a partner at a law firm, her mum sits on boards, which I still don't fully understand, but it seems to involve a lot of lunches and emails. Mara went to a private school where they have rowing and old girls networks. She studied international relations, then a master's in something with global in the title. She works for an NGO now, the kind that posts heartfelt infographics about policy change on Instagram. Her life is events, panels, planning meetings, travel, writing grant proposals, endless jargon about stakeholders and lived experience. We met in the most cliché millennial way possible, a friend's share house party. The kind where everyone ends up on the same sagging couch by midnight, arguing about politics they half understand, while drinking cheap beer from mismatched mugs. I only went because my mate Jason begged me. "There'll be people there who aren't tradies for once," he said. "It'll broaden your horizons." "My horizons are fine," I said, but I went anyway. I saw her before we were introduced. She was in the kitchen, hair up in a messy knot, big hoop earrings, one hand wrapped around a beer, the other conducting the air like she was orchestrating the conversation. "No, but that's exactly the problem," she was saying, eyes bright. "We treat climate as this separate issue when it's tied to everything else, migration, health, housing. You can't silo it." The guy she was arguing with did that thing where he smiles like he's being tolerant. "So what, we just stop all development?" "No," she shot back. "We stop pretending growth is the only metric that matters. There's a difference." I had no idea what half of it really meant, but the way she spoke, like her words had sharp edges and soft centers, pulled me in. Jason elbowed me. "That's Mara," he muttered. "She does politics stuff, out of your league, mate." "Not trying to date anyone," I lied. Later, when the kitchen thinned out, I ended up next to her at the sink, rinsing a mug. "Thanks," she said, taking it from me. "This place collapses under the weight of its own dishes if no one intervenes." "Happy to be part of the resistance," I said. She laughed. "So which world are you from?" she asked, tilting her head. "Western Sydney," I said. "Electrician. I make sure people's kettles work and their houses don't burn down." Her face lit up. "Oh my God, you're useful," she said. "Everybody here does vague creative jobs and then cries about rent." You just spent 20 minutes talking about global systems, I said. That's not vague. Painfully, she said. I'm in international policy. It's a lot of writing long documents no one reads and fighting with old men in suits about why refugees are human beings. Sounds intense, I said. It is, she replied, but at least no one dies if I stuff up the wiring. People might eventually, I said, if policy's bad enough. She looked at me like she hadn't expected that answer. Fair point, she said and smiled. We ended up on the steps out the back, talking until 3 a.m. about everything and nothing. Her world, my world. How she'd never been further west than Parramatta. How I'd only ever been to the eastern beaches for end-of-year barbies when a mate drove. We laughed about the way the news talks about western suburbs youth like we're a single organism. She asked me what it was like to work in people's houses all day. I asked her what it was like to be in rooms where decisions got made. It felt like bridging a gap. Our first date was pie and chips from a takeaway near my place, eating out of paper on the bonnet of my van. This is illegal, she said, mouth full, looking around the car park. It's only illegal if we get caught, I replied. Besides, it's a rite of passage. She dipped a chip in gravy, made an appreciative noise. Okay, I get it, she said. When I took her to my local, the boys raised eyebrows but were mostly decent. She won them over by annihilating everyone at pool and buying a round. When she took me to her favorite wine bar, dim lighting and $40 bottles, I felt like I'd walked into a different planet. But she squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, just pretend the prices are fake. For a while, the different worlds thing was a joke. You're taking me to your fancy people parties, I'd say, putting on my best posh accent. You're taking me to Bunnings, she'd reply, eyes wide, be still my beating heart. She taught me the difference between a Sauvignon Blanc and a Chardonnay. I still forget, but I tried. I taught her how to use a drill and what an RCD is. She dragged me to rallies. I dragged her to State of Origin. Sometimes it was more serious, but we navigated it. Her parents gave me the polite once-over at first, all those questions loaded with subtext. So, Nicholas, what did you study? Her dad asked over dinner the first time I went to their place. The house had a view of the harbour, art on the walls, a piano no one seemed to play. Cert III in electrotechnology, I said, cutting my steak. He nodded in that way some people do when they hear TAFE and try to hide their surprise. Good trade, he said. Always work in that. Yeah, I said, people like their lights. Mara squeezed my knee under the table. Later, in her old bedroom with the fairy lights still pinned to the wall, she apologized. They're just old school, she said. They think in degrees and titles. They were fine, I lied. They hadn't been awful, just distant, like they couldn't quite see me. My parents loved her. Mum called her that clever girl of yours, and made extra tabbouleh when she came over because she actually eats, not like those other ones who just pick at salad. Dad asked her a million questions about politics in the most honest, unfiltered way, and she answered patiently. It's so nice being around people who talk straight, she said one night after we left my folks' place. No buzzwords. Careful, I said, we might radicalize you into buying a house in St. Mary's. She laughed and rested her head on my shoulder on the train. All of that is why, when things started to shift, I didn't clock it as different worlds yet. It just felt like normal life getting more complicated. Her job ramped up. They landed some big campaign around climate displacement. Suddenly there were late-night strategy sessions, trips to Canberra, stakeholder consultations. She'd come home wired and exhausted, brain still in 10 different time zones. I was growing my business, taking on an apprentice, dealing with the boring side of things, bus statements, chasing up late payments, arguing with a builder who forgot to include my fee. Our schedules stopped overlapping neatly. We still had our rituals, Friday night takeaway, Sunday morning coffee, but there were more gaps. More rain checks, more I'm too tired, can we do it next week? At first we both shrugged it off. We are adults, she said. This is what adult life looks like. The first serious fight we had about our worlds was about money. Classic. I'd had a run of jobs fall through because a developer decided to go with someone cheaper. I was stressed about rent, about the van needing new tires, about the invoice that was 30 days overdue and counting. She'd just come back from a 3-day conference in Melbourne. Her flights and accommodation were covered by work, but she'd still dropped a decent chunk on food, drinks, a new blazer she needed for the panel. We were at the kitchen table, eating pasta. She was animated, telling me about this keynote speaker who'd been fire, and how she'd made a contact from some international organization. And then afterwards we all went out to this bar on this rooftop, and the view was insane, she said. Like, you'd have loved the photos. How much did all that cost? I asked, twirling my fork. She blinked. What? The bar, the dinners, the Uber from the airport, I said. It adds up. She frowned slightly. I mean, yeah, she said, but it's not like I do that every week. I'm not saying you do, I replied. We're a bit tight right now. Maybe we could rein it in a bit. You mean I could rein it in, she said. That's not what I said. But that's what you meant, she shot back. Nick, I pay my share. I cover half the rent, half the bills. I'm not asking you to subsidize my life. I know, I said, feeling that stubborn knot in my chest. It's just hard seeing money go out like that when I'm chasing some bloke who won't pay me $5,000 he owes. She put her fork down. I grew up being told there'd always be money, she said. Now I make my own. I know that's privilege, okay? I know that. But I also know that if I start living like there's never enough, I'll turn into my mum, obsessing over who ordered what at dinner. So I'm your mum now, I said, strung. That's not what I'm saying, she replied, pinching the bridge of her nose. I'm just trying to explain. When I say yes to a $15 Negroni at a rooftop bar, it's not me spitting in your face. It's me, trying to feel like I'm allowed to be in the spaces my job puts me in without constantly doing maths in my head. I didn't know how to respond to that. We both ended up apologizing in that half-baked way couples do when they're tired and don't want to fight anymore. Around that time, I started hearing the name Eli more often. He was, in her words, one of the new policy guys. Tall, by the looks of the one photo I saw when she showed me their team at some event. Clean cut, the kind of guy who probably grew up on the same side of the city as her. He'd studied overseas on a scholarship, spoke 2 languages, had a knack for making ministers actually listen. He gets it, she said once, late at night, sitting cross-legged on the couch with her laptop open. Like, when I talk about how weird it feels to be in these rooms as a woman, as someone who didn't go to the right uni, he doesn't just nod, he adds to it. I made some joke about her replacing me with a policy nerd. She rolled her eyes and said, "You're irreplaceable, don't be dramatic," and kissed my forehead. I believed her. Little things started to stack up, though. She stayed back late more. "We're working on a briefing," she'd text. "I'll be home after 9. Some nights turned into drinks, ran late. I'll crash at Sophie's. Early start tomorrow anyway." Sophie, her work friend who lived closer to the office. Her phone became more present. She'd always been a big texter, big Instagram user, but now there were messages that made her whole face change. That half smile, the one she used to have when I texted her something daft. When I asked what was up, she'd say, "Just work stuff," or "Eli sent me this stupid meme," and then go vague. I told myself I was being paranoid. We were in that busy life stage everyone bangs on about. Of course she'd have close colleagues. It made sense that someone in her world got things I didn't. That had been true from the start. The first proper gut punch came at a fundraiser. Her organization was hosting some fancy event at a gallery. You know the type, canapes, white wine, speeches about impact. I wore my one good shirt, the navy one she'd picked out. She wore a black jumpsuit with a gold belt and looked like she could walk onto TV. "Remember," she murmured as we walked in, "if you get bored, the food table is your friend." I laughed. "You sure they won't kick out the tradie who eats too many mini quiches?" "They're lucky to have you," she said, squeezing my hand. "You're free labor. You'll charm the old donors with your real person vibe." Inside, it was all soft lighting and chatter. I hovered near the back while she did the rounds, hugging colleagues, air-kissing board members. Eventually, she waved me over. "Nick, this is Eli," she said. "Eli, this is my partner." There he was, taller than me, of course. Sharp jawline, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of handshake that's just firm enough. "Hey man," he said. "Nice to meet you. Mara told me you saved her from electrocuting herself with a lamp." "That thing was a death trap," I said. "Some hazards can't be recycled." He laughed. "See, this is why we need more tradies at these things," he said to Mara. "We're drowning in policy wonks." They had this easy banter, the kind you get from long days in the same trenches. They finished each other's sentences when they talked about some campaign. He knew her coffee order. She knew he'd been up late writing a paper for some conference. At some point, I found myself standing slightly outside their circle while they talked to a donor about cross-sector collaboration. I tried to follow, but after a while I drifted off, pretending to examine the art. It hit me then, watching her from across the room, the way she moved here, the way people turned when she spoke. This was her world. "On the train home," I said, "you were really in your element tonight." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "Yeah," she said, "I love it when the work feels coherent." Coherent. Like the event, the messaging, the people in the room. It all lines up with why we do what we do, she said. It doesn't feel like screaming into the void for once. I get that, I said. Today I wired a granny flat whose owner tried to pay me cash and a carton. Not exactly coherent life purpose. She laughed but then went quiet. Do you ever feel like you're straddling two lives? She asked softly. What do you mean? Like there's your day-to-day reality, and then there's this other version of you that might have existed if you'd made different choices, she said. Sometimes when I'm in those rooms, it feels like I've stepped sideways into someone else's life, and then I come home and it's like, snap back. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I asked. She stared out the window. I don't know, she said. Both. I didn't ask what she meant by snap back. I assumed it was about class, about coming home to our rental with its dodgy windows after being in that gallery with catered everything. It didn't occur to me she might have meant me. The real slide started about a month after that. She was distant in small ways, not outright cold, just less present. I'd tell her a story about a client. She'd nod but not ask questions. I'd ask about her day. She'd say long and change the subject. Our sex life, which had always ebbed and flowed with stress, slowed to a trickle. One night we were on the couch, a show playing. I looked over and realized she wasn't watching. She was scrolling her phone, a tiny smile on her lips. Something funny? I asked. She jumped slightly. Oh, just a thing in the group chat, she said, turning her phone face down. Maybe it was petty, but when she went for a shower, the phone buzzed on the coffee table and I glanced at it. Not opened, just the notification. Eli's name, a preview of the message. You were on fire today. Honestly, watching you handle that MP was, and then it cut off. My stomach twisted. It wasn't explicit. It was probably about work. It was also a lot. When she came back, hair wet, I was quiet. You okay? She asked, wrapping herself in a blanket. Yes, I lied. I didn't bring it up then. It felt too small, too easy for her to say I was overreacting. The conversation that eventually broke us started because of a weekend, or rather, because of how she spent hers. We planned a trip up the coast for ages. Nothing fancy, just a cheap Airbnb a couple of hours away, some bushwalks, fish and chips on the beach. The week before, she came home late, dropped her bag and said, "Can we talk about this weekend?" Immediate dread. Okay, I said. She sat on the arm of the couch, twisting the ring on her finger. Not an engagement ring, just a silver band she always wore. There's this retreat thing my work is doing, she said. Strategy and team building, but like actually useful. It's at this eco-lodge and they've invited the policy and campaigns teams. It starts Saturday morning. And, I asked, though I could already see where this was going. And I really feel like I should go, she said. It's important. They're deciding priorities for the next few years. I don't want to be the one who's not in the room. What about our trip? I asked. She winced. We could move it, she suggested weakly. We've already shifted it twice, I said. Once because I had that emergency job and once because you had that panel. The Airbnb won't refund us again. I'll cover the cost, she said quickly. It's not about money. It's not just about money, I said. It's about the fact that every time something from your world clashes with ours loses. She flinched. That's not fair, she said. You know I've bilayed on things for you too. Not like this, I said. This isn't drinks with Sophie. This is something we've planned for months. I've rescheduled clients. She rubbed her temples. Nick, this retreat could literally shape the direction of my work for years, she said. If I'm not there, my projects get sidelined. The stuff I care about doesn't make the cut. So what am I asked. A nice to have that gets bumped for strategy. She looked at me, eyes shiny. That's not what I'm saying, she said, but we knew when I took this role that there'd be sacrifices. I thought the sacrifices would be both ways, I shot back, not just me and our time together. We went in circles for a while. I said things that were more about accumulated resentment than this one weekend. She said things dipped in exhaustion and guilt. If you asked me not to go, I wouldn't, she said at one point quietly. I hated that choice, hated the idea of being the bad guy who held her back, the anchor on her career. I don't want to be that person, I said. I want you to want to prioritize us sometimes without me twisting your arm. Her shoulders sagged. You don't understand my world, she said, the words slipping out. Make me, I said, heat rising. Explain it. I might not speak policy, but I'm not stupid. She shook her head, eyes filling. It's not that you're stupid, she said. You're good, Nick, solid. But when I talk about this stuff, it's like I'm dragging you somewhere you don't want to go. With them, we're already there. With him, I said before I could stop myself. You mean with Eli? She froze, the air in the room changed. What does he have to do with this? She asked carefully. He's at all your late nights, your strategy weekends, I said. He's in the group chat, the memes. He's the one you text when you're buzzing at midnight. Don't pretend he's not part of this. Her jaw tightened. There is nothing going on between me and Eli, she said. Not yet, I said. That was the first time I saw real anger flash across her face. That's not fair, she snapped. I have colleagues, Nick, friends, people in my world. That doesn't automatically mean I'm cheating. I didn't say you were, I replied, though my tone probably did. I said he's in your world in a way I'm apparently not. We didn't resolve it. In the end, she went to the retreat. I told her I understood, kissed her at the door, tasted the salt of her tears and my own swallowed pride. I went on the trip by myself, walked the beaches alone, ate fish and chips in the car so the wind wouldn't steal my dinner. I took photos and didn't send them. She came back from the retreat, lit up in that way she gets when she's in full flight. It was incredible, she said, dropping her bag. We actually had space to think big, not just put out fires. We're building out this whole climate justice framework, and we got to design it, not just implement someone else's plan. I feel I don't know. She searched for the word. Seen, useful. That's great, I said genuinely, but with a heavy stone in my chest. We also had a proper conversation about burnout, she added. Like, really honest. A bunch of us stayed up until 2 a.m. just talking on the deck under the stars. A bunch of you, I asked. She hesitated. Yeah, she said. Me, Soph, Eli, a couple of others. There it was. The Thursday she packed and walked out was about 2 weeks after that. In hindsight, I think the decision had crystallized for her at that retreat. I was just catching up to the plot. That evening started normal. I got home from a long day of crawling through roof spaces, dust in my hair, muscles aching. She was already there, sitting at the coffee table with her laptop, papers spread out, headphones around her neck. Hey, I said, dropping my bag. Smells good. Something was simmering on the stove. Lentil curry, she said. Thought I'd actually cook for once. I went to kiss her, she turned so I got her cheek. Tiny thing, but my stomach noticed. I went to shower, trying to shake off the sense of wrongness. When I came out, she'd set the table properly. Plates, cutlery, even napkins. The cloth ones her mum gave us last Christmas that we never use. My first thought was, she's going to tell me she's pregnant. Second thought, no, you idiot, she would not look this tense if she were pregnant. We ate mostly in silence. She asked about my day, I gave the shorthand version. I asked about hers, she said meetings in a tone that didn't invite follow-up questions. After she cleared the plates, ignoring my I'll do it gesture, I watched her rinse dishes with that too careful focus of someone avoiding their own thoughts. Mara, I said finally, what's going on? She dried her hands on a tea towel, then turned to face me. Her eyes were already glistening. Can we sit down? She asked. Dread flooded me so fast my fingers tingled. We sat opposite each other on the couch. She fiddled with the edge of a cushion, shredded a little piece of thread. I've been rehearsing this in my head, she started, and it never sounds less awful, so I'm just going to say it. In that moment I knew, even before the words formed, my body knew. She looked up, eyes meeting mine, and said, We're different worlds, Nick, and he fits mine. Silence, heavy, thick, full of everything she wasn't saying outright. It took a second before my brain supplied, Eli. Are you joking? I asked, a stupid reflex. No, she said, voice small, I wish I were. I stared at her, at the woman I'd researched mortgages with, whose hair I'd held back when she spewed from food poisoning, who knew how I took my coffee, and which scar on my right hand came from falling off my bike when I was 10. You're leaving me, I said slowly, like we were in a language class. She swallowed. Yes, she whispered. For him, I added. For myself, she said, then flinched at her own phrasing. For a life that feels like it aligns with who I am now. And he just happens to be part of that, I said. Tears spilled over. I know how this sounds, she said. I know I'm the villain in this story. I'm not going to try to convince you I'm not, but it's more complicated than just, I found a shiny new toy. Try me, I said, anger fizzing under my ribcage. Explain how telling your partner we're different worlds, he fits mine, is somehow nuanced. She took a deep breath. When we met, she said, we were both at such different stages. You were building your business. I was figuring out if I even believed in the work I'd studied for. Being with you felt like safety, like someone had my back who didn't care about the bullshit, and I still value that so much. But, I said, hearing it coming from miles away. But, she continued, As things went on, I started feeling like I was splitting myself. There was the me who went to community consultations, who sat in rooms arguing about language and policies that would affect thousands of people, who came home on fire from a protest or broken from some story I'd heard. And then there was the me who came home and tried to compress all of that into, work was busy. I said, every night, how was your day? You could have given me more than busy. I tried, she insisted, but I'd get halfway through explaining some campaign and see your eyes glaze over, or you'd make a joke about bureaucracy, or you'd say, sounds like a headache, babe, and suddenly it felt small, like I was boring you. So instead you talked to him, I said. She pressed her lips together. Yes, she whispered, I did. Did you sleep with him? I asked. The question came out flat. She shook her head immediately. No, she said. I haven't, I swear to you. I couldn't live with myself if I crossed that line while we were still together. Because this feels so much better, I said. She winced. I know it doesn't make a huge difference from your end, she said, but it matters to me. I didn't want to lie to you in that way. You've been lying to me, I said, voice rising. Maybe not with your body, but with everything else. She didn't argue. That almost hurt more. How long? I asked. She looked at the ceiling. I don't know when it started, she said. We were just colleagues, then friends. Then one day I realized that when something big happened, he was the first person I wanted to tell. That when I was hurt, I wanted his take, and that scared me. I tried to pull back, but at the retreat we talked, really talked, about our lives, our families, what we want. And I realized how far I'd drifted from you without even noticing. So the retreat was what? I said. Your emotional soft launch. That's not fair, she said weakly. Fair, I repeated. Do you really want to talk about fair right now? She put her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. I sat there, fists clenched, nails digging into my palms, breathing hard. I am so sorry, she said through her fingers. I didn't plan this. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. You didn't mean for me to get hurt, I said, but you also didn't stop once you realized it was me or him. You picked your world. You picked him. She dropped her hands, eyes red. I picked myself, she said again, more firmly. I picked the version of me that doesn't always feel like she's translating. With him, I don't have to explain every reference, every meeting, every feeling about the work. He just gets it. We speak the same language. If I bought some policy textbooks, would that have helped? I asked bitterly. It's not about textbooks, she said. It's about history, class, the way he hears a name of an MP and immediately knows their voting record. The way when I say intersectionality, I don't have to backtrack and define it. I can Google, I said. You never gave me the chance. She looked stricken. That's not true, she said softly. I tried to bring you in, to take you to events, to explain things. And you tried, I know you did, but you were always visiting my world, a tourist, not a resident. The worst part was, a tiny, traitorous part of me recognized the dynamic she was talking about. I'd felt it too, sometimes in reverse. When I brought her to family barbecues and she'd smile politely while my uncles argued about footy and fuel prices. When I'd explain why a particular job was stressful and she'd say, that sucks, but not grasp the stakes. So your solution, I said, voice shaking, is to pack up and walk out. I don't see another way, she replied. Staying and trying to force us back into something we've grown out of, it would just be a slower, crueler version of this. You could have told me earlier, I said, before there was someone else in the picture. I know, she whispered. I was a coward. I didn't want to blow up our life if I wasn't sure. And then once I knew, it was already entangled. Are you going to be with him? I asked. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was my answer. I don't know, she said, but her eyes said yes if he still wants me. We've agreed to give it time, to not jump straight into something, but yeah, probably. I laughed then, this harsh, ugly sound. So I'm what? I said, the beta version, the test run before you found your upgrades. No, she said fiercely. Don't do that. You were not a trial. You were my home for a long time. You taught me what it feels like to be loved without a gender. That matters. Just not enough to stay, I said. She opened her mouth, closed it, tears spilled again. I can't ask you to understand, she said quietly. I can't even fully explain it to myself. All I know is that every time I walk from the train station to our place now, it feels like I'm stepping between two planets. And I'm tired. I'm tired of shape-shifting. Of feeling like half of me always has to be put away. I thought about my boots by the door, crusted with dust, her heels lined up next to them, my van, her Opel card, my family's fibro house, her parents' view, the way my world had expanded to include hers, while hers had always felt like somewhere I was visiting on good behavior. The anger drained out of me all at once, leaving something hollow and heavy. "What do you need?" I asked, surprising both of us. She blinked. "I need to leave," she said. "Tonight, not forever like logistically, but I can't stay here as your partner when I'm not." "Where are you going?" "Sophie's," she said, "for now." "And then?" "And then I'll find a place," she replied, "or whatever shape my life takes." We talked practicalities in this weird, disembodied way. Lease, furniture, the cat, we don't have one. I half wished we did just so we'd be forced to negotiate something tangible instead of just us. We agreed she'd cover her half of the rent for the next 2 months until I found a housemate or a cheaper place. She'd come back when I wasn't home to get the rest of her things. Then she stood up, wiped her face, and started to pack. That brings us back to the box, the suitcase, her statement hanging between us. "Nick," she said, voice hoarse, "please say something else. Anything, call me a bitch, tell me I've ruined your life, I don't care. This silence is," she shivered. "What do you want me to say?" I asked, my own voice flat. "You've made up your mind. You've rationalized it into some narrative about worlds and fit. If I beg you to stay, you'll resent me. If I tell you to go, I'm co-signing my own abandonment." Her mouth trembled. "I don't want you to co-sign anything," she said. I don't want you to think this was easy, that I'm skipping off into happily ever after while you sit in the rubble." "I don't care how hard it was for you," I snapped. "You still get to leave. I'm the one staying in the house that smells like your shampoo." She closed her eyes like I'd slapped her. "You're right," she said, "you're right." She zipped the suitcase. The sound was obscene in the quiet. At the door she paused, hand on the knob. "I really did love you," she said softly. "My loving you wasn't a lie just because it ended before yours did." I stared at her, at the woman in the doorway, half in shadow, half in the hall light. "I know," I said. "That might be the worst part." She opened the door, stepped out, and then she was gone. No dramatic slam, just a click. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then my life has been a weird mix of hyperclarity and fog. Hyperclarity in the tiny moments. Her hair tie under the couch, the mug she always used at breakfast, the indentation her body left on her side of the mattress. Fog in everything else, days blurring into each other, hours lost scrolling my phone, meals eaten because I remember I should. I've gone through the full cliché arc, checking her Instagram, now set to private, typing and deleting drunk texts, imagining scenarios where she comes back saying she made a mistake. I've also had calmer moments of noticing my own breathing, my own habits, the way the apartment feels bigger and smaller at the same time. I keep circling back to that phrase, different worlds, he fits mine. There's a version of this where I just rage at it, where I say she used class and politics as an excuse for cheating. Some days I lean into that, and it helps me get out of bed. Other days, if I'm honest, I can see glimpses of what she meant. There were times I rolled my eyes at her work stories because I was tired and didn't get the stakes. Times I made jokes about saving the world with PowerPoints when she'd spent days on a briefing. Times I opted out of her world because it made me feel dumb or out of place, or like I'd say the wrong thing. She, on the other hand, showed up in mine. She came to my cousin's wedding at the RSL and danced to Horses with my aunties. She sat in a plastic chair in a dusty warehouse while I fixed a switchboard, just to see what my day looked like. She listened to my rants about dodgy builders and clients who wouldn't pay. I don't think that imbalance means I deserve to be left for someone more fitting, but I can acknowledge it without making it my entire personality. My therapist, yeah, I got one, courtesy of a nudge from my sister, said something in our last session that stuck. "There's a difference," she said, "between understanding someone's reasons and justifying their choices. You can see the structural stuff, class, culture, work, without using it to excuse the hurtful way she handled it. So that's where I'm trying to sit. In the messy middle, I can say, yes, we were from different worlds. Yes, that put strain on us we didn't always know how to articulate. Yes, she found someone who speaks her professional and cultural language more fluently. And also, she owed me a conversation before it got that far. She owed our shared life more than a suitcase and a speech. I don't know what happens next. I'm not about to dramatically quit my trade and go study policy to prove a point. I'm also not going to swear off anyone who isn't from my world. If anything, I've learned that crossing those lines can be incredibly beautiful and incredibly hard at the same time. For now, I'm focusing on small, unglamorous things. Fixing the cracked tile in the bathroom I kept meaning to get to. Cooking meals that aren't just toast. Saying yes when my mates ask me out, even when part of me wants to hibernate. Letting my mum fuss over me without snapping. Some nights the silence is loud. I lie in bed and think about her walking through some other part of the city, laughing at a joke Eli makes, feeling that sense of fit she talked about. I imagine them at some policy thing together, side by side in their world, and it hurts in a way I don't have neat language for. But there are other moments, sitting on my balcony with a beer, watching the sky turn orange over the train tracks, hearing my nephew scream with laughter when I lift him up to touch the ceiling, finishing a job and having a client say, "You're a lifesaver, mate," and meaning it. In those moments, my world doesn't feel like a consolation prize. It feels like a place I belong, not because anyone fits it with me, but because I'm there. Maybe one day, there'll be someone who can stand with one foot in my world and one in theirs, and we'll both do the work of building a bridge instead of expecting the other to cross alone. Maybe not. Either way, I'm learning that my world is still worth living in, even if she walked out of it.